This is Prophetess Gwen, and if you're watching this, more than likely you have just completed chapters 1 through 5 of our studies in the book of Exodus. This week, we encountered who God is and what it means to be in relationship with Him. That we are a chosen generation and we are a royal priesthood, and we are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb. Not only are we saved through grace, but by his loving kindness, we were drawn into an ongoing fellowship with the Lord, our God. And we find out through this journey that was taken by the children of Israel about his sovereignty and that he alone is worthy. And just like Moses, that sometimes it is not justifiable in the mind of man what such a loving father would even see in somebody like me and you. But it is common to be afraid. It is common to miss the mark because of a lack of confidence or a fear of failure that resides on the inside. It resides within. But through Moses and his leadership and Aaron and his servanthood, it is made clear what it means to follow Yahweh and to learn that you too can walk by faith. We talked about covenant during our Bible study with one another, and we talked about the alliance and the agreement and or otherwise a contract between two or more persons that actually oblige them to abide by what is written therein. In this case, however, the alignment is between our Father. It is between the Son, Holy Spirit, and us as the bride of Christ, as a long-lasting fellowship of intimacy that involves trust and commitment and service. Service to the things that are written in the Lamb's Book of Life and the great things that are stored up for me and you. As noted in your guide, you may have some questions like, where is God when challenging situations arise? Or how do I know that God cares the way my life turns out? What does it mean to belong? Am I willing to let go and follow Christ when I don't understand what's going on? Do I trust God to provide for my every need? And how have I experienced his awesome presence and power in my life, knowing what I know right now? Well, these are just a few of what may have come to mind in your journey to freedom from bondage and captivity as you were reading through the first few chapters of the Exodus. To start off, I want to just explore a little bit about what happened to those who went to Egypt. They were of the household of faith, and they were sent through a promise that was actually made to Abraham in the book of Genesis 15:13 through 14, where God said to Abraham, he said, know that your descendants, that they will be strangers dwelling as temporary residents in a land that is not their own. And they will be slaves there, and they will be afflicted, and they will be oppressed for 400 years, of which is actually fulfilled in the book of Exodus chapter 12, verse number 40. But the Lord said, even then, that I will bring judgment on that nation of whom they will serve, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. So the Israelites' enslavement was all a part of the master's plan. The fulfillment that began with Jacob who was the son of Isaac and Rebekah in the book of Genesis 25, chapter 25, verse numbers 21 through 26, where we learn from the womb that Jacob, even then, had to fight for the right to be free. He experienced rejection because he was the shadow of his brother Esau. And then we learn that even later on in his life, he continued as he wrestled with the angel in the book of Genesis 32 and 24. It was one thing after another that it seemed that Jacob had to go through. And for the majority of his life, up until the time that God made a promise that he would take Jacob, whose name later changed to Israel, and his family into the land of Egypt, and that they would become a great nation there. And this is in Genesis 46, verse numbers 3 through 4. Well, God made two promises to Jacob. He said, number one, he said, I'm going to be with you in Egypt, and I'm going to bring you, number two, out of Egypt. Both of these promises, both of these, I'm going to take you in and I'm going to bring you out, are fulfilled in the book of Exodus. And both of these, God most certainly did too. But that said, we now have a bigger problem because Jacob is no more and his family is still in the land of Egypt. Keep in mind that the favor of God was with Jacob through his son Joseph, who was second in command to the first Pharaoh's rule. So at that time, Jacob was instructed to go into Egypt. At that time, there was really no problem with him and his family being there because grace had permitted for him to go. But now that he is no more, there is a new Pharaoh in town, and he doesn't know who Joseph or Jacob is. And so the only concentration really of this new Pharaoh is the size that the Israelites could enlarge to. And all he could think about was the potential for them to overrule his authority. So in other words, he wasn't doing anything but thinking about his own self, Pharaoh. And I'm pretty sure that you can attest to knowing somebody just like this. Somebody who is all about them, where it doesn't matter who they hurt to get to the top, so long as they can get there, that's what matters the most. But I believe that the word tells us that there is a way that seems right to man, but the end thereof is death and not peace. And this, my friend, is the complete opposite of what God promises to give. He promises to give an expected end in the midst of all things to those who walk upright. And we learn in Exodus, in the first chapter, where the children of Israel, they came to Egypt. They came off of a promise, 70 of them to be exact. And they were the children, actually, of Jacob, who were of the families of Reuben, and there was Simeon, and then there was Levi, and there was Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, there was Dan, there was Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. These and their families, they came in, but they died off once the promise that was made to Jacob to go into Egypt and settle there was complete. But the promise to Abraham was not yet carried out. For the families of Jacob died, yes, but the children of Israel continued to multiply thereon. Psalm 105 and 25, it references where the psalmist says he increased his people greatly and he made them stronger than their enemies. Well, he was referencing what was happening in the Exodus and the promise that God made to Abraham to make this a great nation. He said, yes, they will be enslaved. He said, but I will deliver them out of bondage. I will deliver them from the bands of wickedness. Because of this, they were enslaved. They were forced to hard labor. They were placed in bondage. Then the Pharaoh made a decree that every newborn male of Hebrew descent, that they were to be killed off. But we soon found out that Moses' mother saved him from this decree. And the baby Moses was found. He was found and he was raised by the Pharaoh's daughter. And then when he had grown all up, he slew an Egyptian while defending a Hebrew slave, because not knowing that was who he was. He could relate. Now, this is where it becomes interesting. Moses flees to Egypt and dwells in Midian, where he married Zipporah. He then escaped judgment while he was in Egypt. But even in his escape, the Israelites were still there, crying unto the Lord because their bondage was such a harsh reality and seemed like a destiny to their fate. This was chapter 1. Now, I want you to pay close attention to what I'm about to say. Get you a notebook for this study alone, the book of Exodus. Do a recap of what I just taught on chapter 1 and answer these questions. Number 1, how do you think that the new Pharaoh felt about the increase in number of Israelites? See Exodus 1, verse numbers 9 through 10. Number 2, what do you think the Pharaoh did about the increasing number of Israelites in Exodus 1 and 11? Number 3, what do you think occurred after the Israelites were put in bondage? What happened? See Exodus 1, 12 through 14. Question 4. Since placing the Israelites in bondage did not slow their growth in number, what do you think the Pharaoh did next in Exodus 1, 15 through 16? Now, keep in mind as you're reading this, while you search for the answer, that the term Hebrew actually refers to an Israelite. And a midwife is a woman who assists in childbirth. As well, the phrase upon the stool refers to a device. It is a birthing stool on which a woman gives birth. Question 5. What do you think the Hebrew midwives did in response to Pharaoh's decree? See Exodus 1 and 17. Question 6. How do you think the Pharaoh responded when he learned that the midwives had to obey his very command? See Exodus 1, 18 through 19. And then go over to verse number 22. in your answer, make sure you know what it means that the midwives feared God. How did the midwives show that they reverenced God? And what might the midwives have risked by choosing to revere him more than the Pharaoh? Read over Exodus 1:20 through 21 and look for what God did as a result of the midwife's choice to reverence him rather than to obey the Pharaoh's command. What principle can we learn from this account about what God did or what God will do when we reverence him and when we put his will above that of others or even our own? That as we reverence God by putting his will above that of others or our own, that he will bless us. And think about what some modern day challenges could be to what the Israelites, the midwives, actually faced by doing what was contrary to what was asked. In addition, list in your notebooks some of the things that you are doing right now to put the Lord first in your life. For example, you're taking time out to listen to this video, to study his word, and things of the like. Write how God has dealt well with you because of your decision to put his will above your own or his will above other people. And think about how you can improve in showing more reverence to the Lord our God. This was chapter 1. In closing, because Pharaoh was unable to convince the midwives to kill the newborn Hebrew males, he issued a decree to his people. What was that decree? And what would you do if such a decree were in place and you or your family were about to have a baby that the king wanted to be killed off? This concludes chapter 1. Stay tuned. Chapter 2 is soon to come. This is Prophetess Gwen. God bless. In the name of Yeshua HaMashiach.